Hello, 8th graders! I'm so glad to see you again. Рада сьогодні вас зустрічати на каналі вивчення англійської мови Forget Me Not. Сьогодні ми з вами будемо говорити про наших класиків української літератури. Ну, в частності, про Тараса Шевченка, звичайно. Окей, працюватимемо ми з вами будемо на сторінках 74, 75, 76, 77. І завершимо ми сьогодні з вами наш урок повторенням граматичного матеріалу. Окей, повернемося до першої вправи. Work in pairs, працюємо в парах. Look at the picture. Say what you know about these Ukrainian writers and their literary works. Скажіть, що ви знаєте про цих українських письменників, про їх літературні роботи. Тарас Шевченко is one of the most famous Ukrainian poets. And we know about his Kobzar. So, Ivan Franko was a philologist, linguist, and he knew a lot of languages. Леся Українка, is our famous poet, and we know about her illness, but she was quite educated person. Okay, so read the text about Taras Shevchenko. Say what facts of in his biography impressed you most. Прочитаємо зараз ми текст про Тараса Шевченка, і ми скажемо, які факти в його біографії більше за все вплинули на вас. So, Taras Shevchenko. A brilliant Ukrainian poet and artist, Taras Grigorovich Shevchenko was born in the village of Morinci in the family of serfs. Видатний український поет і художник Тарас Григорович Шевченко народився в селі Моринці в сім'ї пастуха. He lost his mother at the age of 9. Його мати померла у віці 9 років. Though his father was a shepherd, бо serfs – це кріпаки, можемо так сказати. Хоча його батько був пастухом, he could read and write, and it was possible for him to teach his children. Він міг читати, писати, і для нього було можливим навчити читати своїх дітей. Taras' childhood was very hard. Дитинство Тараса було дуже тяжким. When Taras was 11, his father died. У віці, коли Тарасу було 11 років, помер його тато. So the boy was orphaned and grew up in poverty and misery. Тому хлопець був осиротів, orphaned осиротів, і він вирос у злиднях і горі. Poverty – бідність, злидні, misery – горе. The boy had a special talent for drawing. Хлопець мав особливий талант до малювання. At the age of 14, he became a servant, houseboy, in the house of his owner, Engelhard. У віці 14 років він був слугою, хатнім хлопцем у будинку його власника, пана Енгельгарда. Енгельгард noticed Shevchenko's artist talent and apprenticed him to the painter of Shiryayev for 4 years. Енгельгард помітив художній талант Шевченка і дав його на навчання художнику Ширяєву на 4 роки. У той час, at the same time, he met the Russian painter Brylov. У той час він зустрів російського художника Брилова. Karl Brylov painted the portrait of the Russian poet Zhukovsky and sold it for 2,500 rubles. Брилов намалював портрет російського поета Жуковського і продав його за 2,500 рублів. The money was used to buy Shevchenko's freedom from Engelhard in 1838. Ці гроші були використані, аби викупити Шевченка у пана Енгельгарта в 1838 році. Shevchenko was admitted to St. Petersburg Academy of Arts, where he studied under Brylov. Шевченка прийняли до Академії мистецтв у Санкт-Петербурзі, і він вчився у Брилова. Taras Shevchenko's literary activity began in 1838. Його літературна діяльність почалася в 1838 році. In 1840 he published his first collection of poems Kobzar. У 1840 році він видав свою першу збірку віршів Кобзар. Taras Shevchenko has an important place in the Ukrainian history. Тарас Шевченко важливе місце займає в українській історії. He was the founder of the new Ukrainian literature. Він був засновником нової української літератури. He established Ukrainian as a national literary language. Він заснував українську літературну мову. It's interesting to know that there is a monument to Taras Shevchenko in Washington, D.C., the USA. Цікаво знати, що є пам'ятник навіть Шевченка у Вашингтоні, США. Okay, well done. Ось такі історії. So, what facts in this biography impressed you most? Які факти з його біографії тебе вразили? So, I was impressed by the fact that Shevchenko orphaned when he was 11. Russian painters bought Shevchenko's freedom, and Shevchenko established modern literary Ukrainian language, and there are a lot of monuments to Taras Shevchenko, not only Ukraine, but also in the USA, in Washington, D.C., and all over the world. Ну, тепер поговоримо за текстом. So, when and where was Taras Shevchenko born? So, he was born in Morinci on the 9th of March. Was he orphaned in his early teens? Чи осиротів він у ранні роки? Yes, he was. He was orphaned. Why did he grow up in poverty and misery? Чому він ріс у бідності? So, he grew in poverty because he was orphaned when he was 11 years old. So, what happened to Taras when he was 14 years old? Що з ним трапилося, коли йому виповнилося 14 років? So, he was brought to the house of his owner, Engelhard, and he worked as a houseboy. What did Engelhard notice? Що помітив Engelhard у Тараса Шевченка? So, he noticed his talent, his artistic talent. How did Taras Shevchenko become free? Як він став вільним? So, Shevchenko became free after Brylov had painted the portrait of the Russian poet Zhukovsky, and Brylov sold it for 2,500 rubles. Where was he admitted in St. Petersburg? He was admitted to Academy of Arts in St. Petersburg. Його взяли до Академії мистецтв, так, у Санкт-Петербурзі. What did he publish in 1840? Що він публікував у 40-му році? So, he published his first volume, Kobzar. What is Shevchenko's role in the history of Ukrainian literature? Яка роль Шевченка в історії української літератури? So, he was a founder of the new Ukrainian literature. Okay. So, look through the text of exercise 2 on page 74. Поглянь ще раз на текст, сторінка 44. And say what you have learned about these people. І скажи, що ви дізналися про цих людей. Engelhard, Brylov, Zhukovsky. Чому про них дізналися з цього тексту? So, Engelhard was a quite rich person, and he had a lot of servants. So, Brylov was a painter, and Zhukovsky was a poet, and Brylov painted Zhukovsky, and he sold the picture of the portrait of Zhukovsky, and he bought Shevchenko. Okay, so, reading lab, jigsaw reading. Working groups, попрацюйте в групах. Read Taras Shevchenko poems in English and do the tasks. Can you recite these poems in Ukrainian? Чи пам'ятаєте ви ці вірші українською мовою? Отже, the first group буде читати Кобзар і давати відповіді на питання, and the second group B буде читати заповіт. Testament. Okay. So, the mighty Dnieper roars and bellows, the wind in anger howls and raves. Down to the ground it bends the willows, and mountain high lifts up the waves. The pale-faced moon peeked out this moment, to peek out from behind a cloud. Like a canoe upon the ocean, it first tips up and then dips down. The cocks have not proclaimed the morning, there is no a sound as yet of man. The owls in glades call out their warnings, and ash trees creak and creak again. Ну і, звичайно, оригінал віршу, так, реве та стогне, ніби широкий. Чомусь його переклали як Кобзар. Окей, погадали. Давайте з вами дамо відповіді на питання за цим віршем. So, for what reason do you think the poet wrote this poem? Яка причина написання цього листа? So, Shevchenko describes the Dnieper as a mighty river which roars and bellows, yes? Okay, so how does Shevchenko describe the Dnieper river? Ой, я дала відповідь на це питання. So, what is the reason, yes? The writer wrote this poem. So maybe he wanted to show that Ukrainians are mighty nation as well. like Dnieper River. So, what is the weather like in the poem? So, the weather is gloomy and angry. Погода така, не дуже гарна, звичайно. What helps you see the picture of the Ukrainian nature? Що допомагає вам побачити природу України в цьому вірші? So, the description of the river, ground, willows help us to see the picture of Ukrainian nature. So, what feelings does the poem awaken in readers? Які почуття? Patriotic feelings, of course. So, why do you think the poet wanted to describe this particular state of the Dnieper River? Чому ви гадаєте, поет хотів описує саме цей стан річки? Maybe he wanted to show that Ukrainians want independence for their country. And they can fight for it. Так, Group B. Testament, заповіт. When I die, pray bury me in my beloved Ukraine, my tomb upon a grey mount high amid the spreading plain, so that the fields, the boundless steppes, the Dnieper's plunging shore, my eyes might see and my ears hear the mighty river roar, when from Ukraine the Dnieper bears into the deep blue sea the blood of foes. Then will I leave these hills and fertile fields. I'll leave them and all and fly away to the abode of God, and then I'll pray, but till that day I nothing know of God. Oh, bury me, then rise ye up, and break your heavy chains, and water with the tyrant's blood and the freedom you have gained. And in the great new family, the family of the free, with softly spoken kindly word, pray man, remember me. Окей, дуже гарний переклад, до речі, саме заповіта. Ну, ви всі знаєте заповіт, звичайно, цей вірш. So, answer this question. Давайте з вами дамо відповіді на ці питання. Ну, for what reason do you think the poet wrote this poem? Це знову ж таки reason, це що? Fighting for freedom. Боротьба за свободу. Which words in the poem show that the poet really loved his motherland? Які слова у цьому вірші показують, що поет любить свою батьківщину? My beloved Ukraine, for example. My beloved Ukraine. Next, the boundless steppes, безкраї степи. The Dnieper's plunging shore. Fertile fields, родючі поля. Okay. So what future did he pray for his countrymen? За яке майбутнє він молиться? So he prayed for freedom. Знову ж таки, freedom. So, did he believe that people could gain their freedom? Yes. Yes. He was dreaming, yes, of the free great country. So why should people fight for freedom? Чому люди мають боротися за свободу? People should fight for their freedom, to be independent, of course, and develop in their own way. Not to be a part of some country, but to be unite and separate state. So why do you think this poem was translated into more than 150 languages? I think it was translated into many languages, so because it has very good meaning. And I think that it's contemporary and modern even nowadays. Окей, таким чином ми з вами обговорили ці два вірші, переклади оригінальної поезії Шевченка. So, now, аудіювання. Listen to the text about Shevchenko's works. Choose and tick the statements true or false. Ну, давайте ми з вами прослухаємо цей текст. Taras Shevchenko's literary works. Kobzar is the name of his first small collection of poems. Then he wrote A Ballet the Bewitched, a completely realistic work about things that were quite usual for those days, relating to the tragic story of a serf girl who had been seduced. Слово seduced – зваблена. Про дівчину, яка була зваблена. A lot of his poems were based on the Ukrainian historical themes. The poem Haidamaki is a good example. In his poems, Shevchenko depicted the mother as the most wonderful, sacred thing on the earth. He wrote of his love for homeland and the fight for its freedom and happiness, of hatred to any oppression, of the fight for spiritual freedom. He expressed burning hatred to any form of national and social oppression. Taras Shevchenko brought completely new themes and images to the Ukrainian literature. His poetry contributed greatly to the evolution of the national Ukrainian consciousness. That's why he is a national poet, a poet of the Ukrainian people. So, Кобзар is the name of his second small collection of poems. False. Це була перша його збірка. His poem Хайдамаки was based on the Ukrainian historical themes. True, правда. Ну, це ми знаємо, не читаючи, не слухаючи навіть аудіювання. In his poems he depicted the mother as a most wonderful person. Yes, це правда. He wrote of his hatred to any oppression. Він писав про свою ненависть. Так? So, that's true. Shevchenko described all themes and images in Ukrainian literature. No. Він описував саме ті теми, які були на той час для нього актуальні. False. He wrote about things that were quite usual for those days. That's true. So, listen to the text again and complete the sentences. Прослухайте текст знову і продовжіть ці речення. Okay. So, Kobzar is the name of his first small collection of poems. Then he wrote a ballet, The Bewitched. Зачарована, зваблена. Так, a completely realistic work about things that were quite usual for those days, relating to the tragic story of a serf girl who had been seduced. Отже, одразу можемо заповнити. Kobzar is the name of Shevchenko's first small collection of poems. He wrote a ballet, The Bewitched. It was a tragic story of a serf girl who had been seduced. Отже, ці три речення ми з вами заповнили. A lot of his poems were based on the Ukrainian historical themes. The poem Haidamaki is a good example. In his poems, Shevchenko depicted the mother as the most wonderful sacred thing on the earth. He wrote of his love for homeland and the fight for its freedom and happiness, of hatred to any oppression, of the fight for spiritual freedom. He expressed burning hatred to any form of national and social oppression. So, Taras Shevchenko brought completely new themes and images to the Ukrainian literature. His poetry contributed greatly to the evolution of the national Ukrainian consciousness. That's why he is a national poet, a poet of the Ukrainian people. So, in his poems, he wrote of his love for homeland and the fight for its freedom. Чому він є національним поетом і поетом людей? So, тут можна написати His poetry contributed to the evolution of the national Ukrainian consciousness, самопізнання. His poetry contributed to the evolution of the national Ukrainian consciousness, so that's why he is a national poet, a poet of the people. Самовизначення, так би мовити, так сказати. So, wrote of the first of the fight for spiritual freedom. So, he wrote of the fight, просто he, Taras Shevchenko wrote of the fight for spiritual freedom. And the last one, Taras Shevchenko brought completely new themes and images to the Ukrainian literature. Okay, so speak in class and talk about Taras Shevchenko and his poems. Say what your favorite poems are. Розкажи про те, які у тебе улюблені вірші його. Ну і останнє, complete the sentences using the past continuous form of the verbs. Повторюємо past continuous. So, what were you doing when I saw you yesterday? Якщо у нас питання в past continuous, то і відповідь буде відповідно в past continuous. I was talking to the librarian. Я розмовляв з бібліотекарем. Who were you talking when I phoned you? З ким ти розмовляв, коли я тобі телефонував? It was my brother. He was telling me about the book he read. Він мені розповідав про книгу, яку він читав. Were you watching TV when I called you last night? Ти дивився телевізор, коли я тобі дзвонив минулого вечора? No, I wasn't. I was reading a magazine. Я читав журнал. Were you playing tennis yesterday afternoon? No, I wasn't playing tennis. I was doing my homework. Грав вчора в теніс вдень? Ні, не грав. Я робив ДЗ, домашнє завдання. Окей, well done. Отже, трошечки в кінці повторили ще використання past continuous tense. Ну, ось таке вийшло на сьогоднішнє заняття. Сьогодні ми говорили про українців, про нашу літературу і про Тараса Шевченка, one of the most famous representative of Ukrainian literature, yes, who brought new images to the Ukrainian literature, who established Ukrainian literary language. Окей, прочитали 2 цікавих переклади варіанта його поезії, послухали аудіювання і зробили після завдання, після аудіювання. Ну і повторили граматичний матеріал. Чекаю вас на наступному уроці. На наступному уроці ми будемо говорити вже не про українців, а про британців. About the British writers. Ну, звичайно, будемо говорити і про Вільяма Шекспіра, і про Роберта Бернса, і про Сера Артура Конана Дойла, ну і про Рудігарда Кіплінга. Усі вони вам відомі з самого дитинства, з початкових класів. На сьогодні все. Thank you for your attention. See you next lesson. Bye!